Hello, welcome to Unit 2, Intro to Argument, the Importance of Perspective. Today we are going to start with a warm-up, so if you could please navigate to the warm-up in your class packet, which is Unit 2, Day 2 lesson. You have several prompts that you can choose from in the warm-up, so pick one of the prompts to answer. Please write and complete sentences and answer the prompt thoroughly. You might include examples to support kind of like your reasoning. You might also include just extra sentences of explanation. All right, so you should have paused the video to answer the warm-up, and if you didn't, you can do so now. You can pause and answer one of these questions. But you also might have noticed that each of these questions have to do with perspective. How someone defines beauty might be different than how someone else defines beauty. Your parents' views on like the COVID-19 era and like your views on that might be completely different. And so thinking about if you were to look, if your parents were to walk in your shoes for a day, how might their perspective change, or how might their views change? And then the last one, my stuff, what I have or own, contributes to how I define my identity. You were asked to either agree or disagree with that. And so when you think about that, some people might have different perspectives on that, on how they define themselves or how they identify, especially how materialistic objects play into that. Before we get started today, I do want to take some time to review the mastery check from yesterday. Yesterday, you were asked to read several student essays and score those essays using the rubric. I am going to go over 4 of those essays, so you might want to have your classwork from yesterday's lesson, Unit 2, Day 1 open, just to check and make sure that you're scoring it correctly, that we're calibrated on the same scale. So the first essay you read yesterday was Sample Essay C, and you probably noticed that this was a pretty strong essay. The student starts with some context in their introduction about this unknown and fear, and then leads into a very definitive stance. So they did get the thesis statement point, and here is the thesis statement. In this sense, she is absolutely correct. The exploration of the unknown has led to unprecedented scientific development, cultural development, and personal development alike. You'll also notice that the student had very specific examples and commentary, so evidence and commentary, when it came to why exploring the unknown was such a fulfilling and enriching activity. So the first paragraph focused on John F. Kennedy and his quest to get us to the moon. Even though going into outer space is an unknown, we don't really have a lot of information about it. It didn't stop us from pursuing the scientific endeavor. You'll also notice that Galileo is mentioned, as are several other scientists throughout history. The second paragraph kind of, not only is it just a trend in science, but in music as well. And the student clearly has extensive background knowledge in classical music, as he references Bach and several other string composers. And then last, he talks about the transcendentalist Henry David Thoreau. And again, he's taking his time to really explain his thinking and to counter-argue what the opposing side might say. This was an extremely strong essay. It got all 6 points, so it earned a 1 in thesis, a 4 in evidence and commentary, and a 1 in sophistication. For sample G, you'll notice that this student started with an anecdote, a story about when he was 9 years old and his parents decided to take him to a climbing wall. And of course, he was only 9. He wasn't really sure. He was really afraid. And yet he was glad that he stepped into this new venture and took the risk. And so this student also has a very strong definitive stance. And it starts here. Nowadays, climbing is one of my favorite. I'm confident that if I had not climbed on my 9th birthday, I have not ventured out of my comfort zone, then I may have never climbed at all for the rest of my life. This student actually kind of embeds his stance, and you can kind of see that through the examples that like exploring the unknown is worth it, even if it is frightening at first. And so the student did get the thesis point. We may not think this essay is as strong as the first one, and yet it still does an excellent job of providing specific examples and providing enough commentary and explanation of why that example supports the stance. And the student uses examples such as Christopher Columbus, and then also uses examples of Michael Phelps, and has a paragraph here of just context of people in general. And so the student takes time to develop a stance and did earn all 6 points. There were other essays that you were asked to evaluate and decide what scores they earned in thesis, evidence and commentary, and sophistication, but I want us to skip to sample F. You might have noticed when you started reading sample F that the student starts strong, starts with an example. When we are born into this world, we are naturally adventurous. Even before we can walk, we crawl around looking for new things to feel, new things to bite or taste. But around 10 years old, we start developing preferences and begin to fear the unknown. That's a strong start, and yet it doesn't develop a stance soon enough. I would really encourage the student to think about incorporating a thesis statement that defines the stance. Like, is it enriching and fulfilling to explore the unknown or not? Or is it a more nuanced argument than that? The student did earn the thesis statement point because it is actually embedded later into the essay. So if you look at paragraph 4, it says, I believe that exploring the unknown is essential to be a well-cultured and intelligent individual. So he does stand by that we should be exploring the unknown. It is not a well-developed argument and lacks specific evidence and commentary to support that, and a line of reasoning. So the student earned a 1 in thesis, a 1 in evidence and commentary, and did not earn the sophistication point. All right, in sample H, her last sample, this is just a paragraph, and the student did not develop a stance that answers the prompt. Instead, they kind of just summarized what it means to explore the unknown, and that did not answer the prompt or take a stance. They earned a 1 in evidence and commentary and a 0 in sophistication, so a 1 out of 6 overall. All right, so hopefully that clarified some of the misconceptions, if you had any, with the rubric and how we're evaluating our argument essays. It also hopefully gave you some good ideas as to how to go about answering these types of prompts. What kind of thinking should we be doing when we're answering an argument prompt? All right, so today we're going to be exploring the complexities of argumentation. And this really should say we're just beginning to explore. We won't cover all of the complexities of argumentation in just today's lesson. And so some of the skills that we're focusing on are effectively entering into an ongoing conversation about a subject, means engaging the positions that have already been considered and argued about. So when we go into these prompts, we need to not just think about our own stance, but the multiple perspectives that people might have in this conversation, and whether we need to refute those perspectives or whether we need to challenge them or maybe accept them and concede that they are true. So when writers concede, they accept all or a portion of a competing position or claim as correct. They agree that the competing position or claim is correct under a different set of circumstances, or they acknowledge the limitations of the argument. We need to be authentic in our argument. We don't want to just say this is absolutely correct and I stand by just this, because it's pretty hard to prove that your stance is right over anyone else's. And so it's important that we're considering all the arguments, refuting the ones perspectives that we know to be not true, and acknowledging the ones and limitations that we think are true. So today's lesson begins with understanding multiple perspectives and exploring the complexities. One of the examples of just taking time to explore multiple perspectives is if we think about this situation of being stuck at home. So many of us are stuck at home. Some of us are not stuck at home and we still are going to daily jobs. And that also is another perspective to include. I've included 3 perspectives, and these are just perspectives that I'm aware of in my own daily life. And I'm sure you can think of ones that relate to yourself as well. So perspective A is me. I am grateful to have a job that allows me to work from home. Not everyone has that same privilege. I'm grateful to have a safe shelter while I'm pregnant during this pandemic. However, I'm also sad that my mom and dad will probably not be able to meet the new baby until she's 6 to 8 weeks old because of COVID regulations. So if you think about it, I have multiple perspectives on this situation, even within this, just this one person. Perspective B is my mom, and she lives in North Carolina, so she is super sad to be stuck at home because she misses her children who don't live within the state. And so she's one of those people that's trying to figure out Zoom so she can talk to us multiple times a day. Perspective C is my husband, who had already worked from home before the pandemic, so his daily life has not changed as much as maybe mine. But he wishes he had more space because it's really hard for us both to be on conference calls all day in this tiny apartment, and so we kind of have to figure that out. And so you'll notice there's so many perspectives to include. There's also the perspective of like, you can think of your grandparents or your parents or what you are thinking about being stuck at home. Some of us really wish we could be back at school right now. And so it's important that we are considering all those perspectives when we start to form an argument. All right, so today you are going to be listening to Chimamanda Adichie's TED Talk. Chimamanda Adichie is an author and public speaker. She wrote Americana, which is one of my favorite novels. I'm not sure if your class read that last year or not. I don't believe you had the chance to, but I could be wrong. You might have read it on your own. So you're going to watch Chimamanda Adichie's TED Talk titled The Danger of a Single Story. You might have seen this before, and that is A-okay. I would like for you to just capture some key details as you're watching her TED Talk. It's about 18 minutes. And we're preparing for a reflection question. So as you're watching, you might want to keep this in mind. According to Adichie, why might a single perspective be dangerous? Where, and this is you making a connection, where in our daily lives are we confronted with single perspectives that are particularly dangerous? All right, so watch the video, capture your mastery check reflection. Make sure you're answering this with thorough, complete sentences, examples, etc. And as always, if you have any questions, please feel free to reach out to your teacher or ask them in the chat.